You're listening to The Real Short Box, a comic book podcast made for geeks by geeks.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in and listening to us here at The Real Short Box. My name is Donald, and I am here with very special guest, Remington Keyes. Remington is an amazing author. He's produced some stuff. He's a writer. He's a podcaster. So thank you for being here, Rem. We really appreciate it.
Hey, the pleasure's all mine. I love working with you. I love your show and love being here. So,
thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. We met years ago through a mutual friend, pretty much online, and just kind of took it from there. It was I love social media for that reason. There's a lot of negatives, sure, about social media, but then there's relationships that you can build with strangers across the globe and become friends with them. So I appreciate you as well. And welcome again. And today we are going to be talking about the downfall of Saturday morning cartoons. Ooh. So this is the prelude to, I guess, Halloween time when we talk about really scary things. And for me as a kid, one of the scariest things was to turn on the TV and see that there was no Saturday morning cartoons. I don't know about you, Remington, but it was pretty tragic for me when I first realized that was no longer happening.
Well, yeah, it took away something that had been with almost all my life, and it happened like right when I was, in high school. So it's like something I've been doing all my life and just disappeared,
Yeah, just gone. They just took it right away from you. Now, when you're talking about Saturday morning cartoons, the general consensus is that Saturday morning cartoons kind of started in the 50s. And that was it was a ritual for children to sit down on Saturday mornings. Their parents did not want to deal with their kids because they've had them to deal with them all week. They were like, let's set them down in front of the TV, the onset of television, and let's have them watch cartoons on Saturday mornings while we do our chores, or we sit around and talk and hang out with our significant other or with our friends or whatever like that. And the kids would sit in front of the television. That happened in the 1950s with Crusader Rabbit, and then not long after that with Rocky and Bullwinkle, which was also a creation of Crusader Rabbit's producer, which was Jay Ward. So that's kind of how Saturday morning cartoons got started. You started seeing more and more cartoons like that. And it's weird to even think that Rocky and Bullwinkle came out in the 50s and it's still relevant today. A lot of people know who Rocky and Bullwinkle are to this very moment. That's almost 75 years.
And they're still doing reboots of it.
Yeah, they did a movie. They've done multiple reboots. So if you think about it, one of the most lasting things in the history, like probably when the Earth like expires, when we all melt or whatever, and everything catches fire, when they finally open these time capsules or the programs that we've launched into space and stuff, we're going to be remembered for our cartoons. That's just the way I feel. As far as the older cartoons are concerned, we're talking 50s, 60s, 70s. Do you have any favorites yourself? Anything that you can think of?
For Saturday morning cartoons, I like to think of like stuff like Hanna-Barbera. They had the Super Friends, which I was really big into. Scooby-Doo, stuff like that. Yogi Bear, I really enjoyed Underdog and George of the Jungle, Josie and the Pussycats. That's
Dudley Do-Right, stuff like that. Yeah, I remember all that. Especially Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo was like a seminal piece of my childhood. Like I loved Scooby-Doo. I think that's what actually got me into mysteries, into murder mysteries and stuff as I got older, Agatha Christie style stuff, and then just murder mysteries in general. And I think it was last year. Last year was a really good year for murder mysteries. Glass Onion came out. There was another Perot, Agatha Christie. I think it was Death on the Nile came out, and there was a few others. See How They Run, and then I think there was one or two other murder mysteries that came out. So it was actually 2022 was a really good year for a revival on murder mysteries, and it continues on a little bit into this year as well, which is
it's funny exciting. That you say that. Anytime I see a Scream movie, I go, man, this would be perfect for a script for a Scooby-Doo movie.
Yeah, and they would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for those rotten kids, which is kind of how it works, or it was. It's interesting with Scream because Scream, as it's kind of aged itself out, and then they had to reboot it in order to inject it with some more youth again. So they continuously do that to make the franchise fresh. And I think that they've been relatively successful with that. Although, spoiler alert, killing Dewey was a mistake.
Oh, absolutely.
100%. Big mistake. But anyway, I digress on that. So we've got the onset of Saturday morning cartoons, and then we have the heyday, the 60s, the 70s, even up to the 80s. The 80s was significantly special. And that's because television stations, networks realized that they could monetize this stuff. They could create, instead of just creating cartoons to get content for the airwaves, the production companies behind it could partner with toy companies and use that to sell product. You would have
even before then, the 70s was full of ripoffs of sitcoms. There were kid versions of the sitcoms that the parents were watching. So I think that was kind of the start of it transitioning into the toy era.
I think you're right, because with like, for example, the Honeymooners, they came out with the Flintstones. And interestingly enough, the Flintstones were not a Saturday morning cartoon originally. They were a primetime cartoon, and they even advertised cigarettes.
Oh, yeah.
You can look up on YouTube. You can look up Fred and Barney smoking cigarettes outside, talking about how great these cigarettes are. It's crazy. You can watch these commercials, these little snippets of these cartoons on YouTube about it. Just Google on YouTube, or just look up on YouTube Fred and Barney or the Flintstone smoke or something like that, Flintstone cigarettes, and you'll see that. It's kind of nuts.
And it's crazy. The brand that they smoke is still around to this day, because I work at Pride Station, and like anytime I hear Winston cigarettes, I'm like, oh, that's the one Fred Flintstone smokes.
Yeah. Or what was that? There's another one called American. It's called American Spirit, I think was the name of it, or something like that. Yep. A lot of people smoke that, and a lot of people smoke the unfiltered version, which is nuts to me. But to each his own. I'm not going to judge people as long as they're not blowing it in my face. I'm cool,
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have the onset of cartoons. We have the 70s. We had, like you said, we had the Scooby-Doo. We had Josie and the Pussycats.
But more importantly, with the 70s,
Monster.
They had the stuff that was like where you're going into with the 80s. They had stuff like the Dukes of Hazzard cartoon, Mork and Mindy, Happy Days, Partridge Family, Gilligan's Island, Star Trek got an animated series, Brady Bunch. All those are based off these adult properties. Planet of the Apes had a cartoon. Lassie had a cartoon. Even Godzilla had a 70s cartoon.
Yeah. And then they, weirdly enough, like some of these properties, like Planet of the Apes, who would have thought, in my mind, that would like get an animated series, a cartoon. And then they go ahead and they do it with RoboCop, which blew my mind, in the 80s. I was like, oh my God, RoboCop has an animated series. Okay. All right. Let's just go with it. And then you had the Ghostbusters, and then you had the real Ghostbusters, Super Friends. We had another kind of a primetime cartoon, the Jetsons, that would air. I believe it would air after the Flintstones. So we would have all these. The Pink Panther show came out, which was really confusing to me, because the original, the television, the movie, in the film world, you had the Pink Panther, and then the cartoon was about the actual Pink Panther, not the Diamond, but the Panther, the Pink Panther himself.
Yeah.
So that's when I'd never seen the movies, so I went back and I watched the movies thinking that this Pink Panther would appear, and he never did. And I was so disappointed. I remember I was a teenager and I was so disappointed watching it and going, where the hell's the Panther? Where's the Pink Panther at? And they're like, oh, this is about a jewel that's been stolen or something. And I was like, oh, okay. Let's just go with that. All right.
I was disappointed the same way.
Yeah. Kind of threw me off. It really did, to be honest. So we look at all these great cartoons that we had, right? And everything that was continuously coming out. And then we get in, to like I was saying, the 80s, and they start talking about how, they can market these into toys. G.I. Joe specifically. G.I. Joe's been going for forever. Like I think the 50s or 60s, G.I. Joe has been going on, and they had the large dolls, and then they made them smaller for the 80s, and then they were brought back and they were huge again, and then they came out with the Transformers, and then the Thundercats. Transformers were cars that were turned into robots, and then they had GoBots. They had Battle Beasts. There were so many things in the 80s. They were just throwing everything against the wall to see what would stick and see what they could sell. And they sold a ton, and they sold so much, and everything became such a plug to buy the product that parents started to become concerned, and they started to raise questions. And then the government took action, and they said, okay, we need an oversight committee on these cartoons to see what's going on. And so they decided then that every cartoon couldn't just advertise something. There had to be a lesson. A child had to learn a lesson. So what they did in the 80s is they said, okay, let's look at this cartoon, G.I. Joe, for example. You remember, and maybe you don't, but there's this infamous one in my head where these kids are playing basketball, and the one's like, I need some energy. And he goes and grabs a candy bar. And one of the G.I. Joes walks up to him. He's like, hey, kid, that candy bar will give you a short burst of energy. But if you want a longer sustained burst of energy, you should have something more healthy like this apple. And the kid's like, oh, thanks, Beachhead, or whoever it was. And then the Joe tossed him the apple, and the kid, threw the candy bar away and ate the apple.
And then it'd be the more you know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Go Joe, Yeah. So that one always cracked me up. They had it with the Thundercats. They had it with Transformers. A lot of them did this lesson thing at the end. They capped it at the end. When I was a kid, I would just shut it off. Just go to the next cartoon. I'd be like, I don't care about this apple. I want a candy bar. I'm eating my cereal that's filled with sugar based off of a cartoon. And so it continued like that. And then the Turtles hit in 86, 87. Mm-hmm. And the Turtles were a huge revelation. It was mass hysteria. It was like the Beatles were for music. The Ninja Turtles were for Saturday morning cartoons. They were everywhere.
Ironically, I didn't get into the Ninja Turtles on Saturday morning. I got it through Burger King Kids Meal.
Yeah. Burger King would have stuff. I think McDonald's eventually got it, but yeah, Burger King was one of the earlier ones to latch on to Turtle Mania, so to speak.
They used to give out the VHSs in the Happy Meals.
Yes. Yeah. And then the X-Men in the 90s, the animated series followed suit with that. And you could get a personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut, and it would come with a VHS tape with the first cartoon on it. It came with a mini comic and a trading card. I remember that very clearly because I would say that I read books that I didn't read in order to get a stamp on my card so I could go into Pizza Hut then and get a free personal pan pizza with the X-Men stuff on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was a little sneaky. I was a sneaky little shit. I ended up reading probably most of what I said I read, but there's probably still a few out there that I never finished, and it's whatever. I got my pizza. I'm good. So we move on. We've got the Turtles. We start getting like the Tick comes in. Batman the animated series comes on in the afternoons. So we have Batman, we have Darkwing Duck in the afternoons, DuckTales in the afternoons. So we're getting a nice balance of morning cartoons and afternoon. But 1992 is a very critical year.
I was just about to say, was when Saved by the Bell came and destroyed it for NBC?
Pretty close, yeah. Like in Saved by the Bell was around in the 80s, and it'd been around for a while. But those type of teenage shows, production was usually pretty cheap, and they could cap it with a lesson at the end, or even just put the lesson within the episode, because they weren't, in this instance, they weren't selling products so much as they were selling a style. They were selling the style of the shows. And this was Aaron Spelling's type stuff that he was going through. Beverly Hills 90210 would come eventually, and then Melrose Place, and so on and so forth. And then we would get Charmed and Seventh Heaven and all this stuff, so that basically Saved by the Bell kind of started all of that.
Yeah.
So NBC saw the profitability of these types of shows. And in 1992, they abandoned their original Saturday morning cartoon lineup, and they replaced it with Saturday morning edition of Today. They added in live action teen oriented block with the Saved by the Bell, California Dreams, other teen, sitcoms and stuff. So they had proved that that's more successful for them. So they, at that point, had cut cartoons. ABC soon followed suit. CBS would follow. The stalwarts, the ones that stayed the longest, was Fox, because Fox said, let's have Fox Kids. Fox Kids is the place for cartoons. Fox Kids is the place for children. Fox Kids is the place for Saturday mornings. So they continued on well into the 90s, Fox Kids. And that's when we got the X-Men. That's when we got the Tick. That's when Batman the Animated Series was going strong. These types of things. You would get all of these shows on Fox Kids. CBS did try to pivot, and they had a lineup on Sunday mornings. Then they started doing Sunday mornings, where you would have shows.
Sunday mornings, yeah.
Yeah, you would have shows like The Incredible Hulk, Wildcats, things
Magic
like
School
that.
Bus.
Yeah, Magic School Bus, stuff like that they would have, and they would show to people on Sunday mornings. So Sunday mornings became kind of a weird hodgepodge of cartoons that you didn't necessarily know you wanted.
You know what show I used to watch on Sunday mornings?
What's that?
You're gonna laugh at this. It was a Power Rangers ripoff called Tattooed Teenage Alien Fighters from Beverly Hills. That was a Sunday morning show.
I have never heard of that in my entire life, dude.
Oh, it is like the cheapest ripoff of Power Rangers you could ever find.
We were getting there on Power Rangers, by the way, because that was a Fox Kids show.
Yeah.
Power Rangers became what Ninja Turtles was. Where Ninja Turtles started to fade, Power Rangers stepped in and said, hold my beer. Basically, Power Rangers took over the airwaves for cartoons. You had at least a couple different Power Ranger shows on. You would have Power Rangers in the afternoon, Power Rangers in the morning. You would have Power Rangers pretty much almost 7 days a week, if not 7 days a week. You would get to see something with Power Rangers, just like you used to in the 80s and 90s with Ninja Turtles, primarily the 80s, I would say, with Ninja Turtles.
And ironically, they both have 24-hour channels playing right now currently.
That's insane to me.
Because there's so many Ninja Turtles and Power Ranger episodes, they both have their own television channels that just airs 24 hours Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles.
Yeah. And it was like, and then you start looking at, you start thinking about Congress, in response to steady pressure, like I was saying about parents, that what they enacted was the Children's Television Act. So that was a big thing that came in the 90s that started to affect even more so cartoons. And it became harder for them to monetize and create product and money. And so the government was making it harder on them. And then you look at, as the 90s developed and became, into the mid to late 90s, we had personal computers were becoming more available in households. You had the internet was something that people were starting to be able to get and to share and to use. They were all able to access things online. We had VCRs, we had DVD players that were coming out in the late 90s. So technology was growing and ways to get entertainment was growing. Cable expanded. Cartoon Network became a home for people to watch cartoons. So if you had cable, why did you care about Saturday morning cartoons when you could turn on the Cartoon Network and you could get cartoons 24/7?
And this is where I started writing notes about the downfall of Saturday mornings. And I wrote down into 5 categories.
Okay.
So I got CBS.
Mm-hmm.
I got ABC, which was the second. So CBS was the first one in the 2000s for the downfall. And I'll say what killed them was the Nickelodeon programming. They used to play Nickelodeon on CBS, but then then everybody started getting cable, and then they had no need to go to CBS to watch Nickelodeon on Saturday mornings. And because there was a lack of original content there, I think that's what killed CBS doing Saturday mornings again.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Because they were competing with ABC, Kids WB, and Fox Kids. And Kids WB was rocking in the 2000s with cartoons. They had Static Shock, Jackie Chan, Scooby-Doo, Pokemon. And Pokemon really saved Saturday mornings in the 2000s from dying,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of brought it back a little bit.
It was very popular for my brother and me watching it. And
they've talked about the Jackie Chan cartoon too, and how actually good it was, and how layered the stories were. In that, if you missed the boat on that, you should go back and watch the Jackie Chan cartoon.
It's one of those celebrity cartoons that weren't a joke.
Yeah,
a lot of the celebrity cartoons were kind of formulaic and stuff. When this was a real cool action cartoon with real Chinese lore, and it felt like cartoon versions of the Jackie Chan movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So and then ABC, what ABC was doing was they had Power Rangers. So they did Power Rangers in anime. I don't know if you remember the Monkey Squad or Super Hyper Monkey Squad 5 or whatever. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that at all.
It was like a Power Rangers kind of cartoon ripoff, but with monkeys. They'd air that with Power Rangers, and then they would put Disney Channel content after. So people who didn't have cable could watch Disney Channel on Saturday mornings after Power Rangers and this monkey anime, And they had Digimon.
Digimon, I remember. And I also remember Big Bad Beetleborgs, I think was one of them.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Power Ranger knockoffs that came out. Because, when you're at the top of your game, people want to emulate your success. So you started seeing a lot of Power Ranger knockoffs, and they started coming out fast and furious. I mean, there was a lot of them.
And I think Disney bought Doug, too, to put on Saturday mornings. And what killed them is what killed CBS, is eventually they stopped putting brand new programming, and the only new programming was Power Rangers.
Yeah.
And people just got sick of that,
Yeah, well, I mean, also your fan base aged,
Yeah.
and as a fan base ages, they tend to lose interest in things. And that's not necessarily for life. There's that sentimentality that comes back around, but that takes a long time for sentimentality to kick back in. That's why we're getting a resurgence of Power Rangers now, because men and women that are now in their, in their late 20s, early 30s, early to mid 30s, that were fans of Power Rangers when they were younger, are now starting to look back on it with this sentimentality.
Absolutely.
And wanting to revisit it and wanting to collect figures based upon their childhood and stuff. And with the passing of Jason David Frank too,
That was
created
awful.
and it created a lot more sentimentality within the Power Ranger world. And for those that don't know, I actually did do an interview last year at Los Angeles Comic Con, where I interviewed Allison Kipperman, the Yellow Ranger from Power Rangers Wild Force. So that is available on our YouTube channel at Rumble Spoon Productions. You can go there and you can check out that interview. It's about a 10 to 15 minute interview. So it's pretty quick, where it's just me and Allison, and we're talking about her career, her successes, her future, and things like that. So it was a really interesting interview that I got to do with one of the Power Rangers that was around in that time, that was acting in in those shows. So that's a really good one if you guys get a chance to check that one out.
And then, so we'll go back to Kids WB, because after ABC did the, I think they lasted until 2011 for Saturday mornings.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went back to focusing on Disney Channel and stuff after that, because they sold Power Rangers back to Nickelodeon. And so we'll go back to Kids WB. Kids WB hit a point where they instead of focusing on shows that were working, they were making these weird reboots of shows. Like they made an action cartoon with the Looney Tunes. They had called Lunatics Unleashed. They had made a Scooby-Doo reboot about them solving like James Bond style crimes, because I guess Shaggy's uncle got rich and they're trying to stop this guy from taking his money or something. I don't know. They were making all these weird decisions, which led to people not watching the show, which made it decline. And the same thing was going on with Fox Kids. There was a rise in anime, but no original content. So they would just dub animes. And, animes go on forever. So you got the same anime going on. And there's not a new show every year,
Yeah, that's crazy. It sounds like they were desperate for content. It sounds like they couldn't figure out how to reach America's youth. And they were like, well, Scooby-Doo did well for us in the past, for the past 20 years. Let's see if we can bring it into the new era, the new decade for kids. Let's freshen it up. Let's liven it up. Let's change this. Let's change that. They bring in different writers. They bring in, animators, and they start to put it all together. And then they do test markets and they show it to kids, and they're like, oh, well, the kids seem to pay attention, so I guess it went well. And then they would air it, and it was like an instant failure. And they're like, oh shit, okay,
yeah,
next.
they were doing weird stuff with it, like they had censored Tom and Jerry, where it's Tom and Jerry, but they can't show anything.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I hated that. Censoring Tom and Jerry, and Tom and Jerry, don't get me wrong, Tom and Jerry is a very violent kind of a cartoon. In fact, that was the inspiration for The Simpsons Itchy and Scratchy.
Yeah.
So, you have that as the inspiration, but it's just the way to kind of bookend this and kind of cap off everything that we're saying here, Remington, is that Saturday morning cartoons had an amazing run, probably about 40 years of spectacular programming for kids as far as entertaining. And then in the 90s, it started to die. And then by the 2000s to the mid 2000s, it was basically completely gone. You go on Saturday mornings, it's news.
Well, my whole point about this ABC, Kids WB, and Fox Kids thing comes together. It all has to do with Power Rangers, because the guy who owned Power Rangers in the 90s, who created it, saw them all dying, all three of them dying, and bought all three and merged them together as the CW for Kids.
Mm-hmm.
He rebought Power Rangers, rebought Fox Kids, and Kids WB and merged them together as one thing, and really put the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
Seriously.
When people think that, like, and sometimes people think that they're doing the right thing or something that's going to work for them, and it just does the exact opposite. And that's the unfortunate truth of it. Saturday morning cartoons had a lot of things going for it, and then it had a lot of things against it. Once the government stepped in, once parents started to notice more about the programming, the kids screaming in the toy aisle that they wanted this toy because they saw it in their favorite cartoon, parents going, "Oh God, this is terrible. I don't have the money for all this crap. This is stupid. I'm going to contact my local representative." They would contact the local representative, and then it just kind of ballooned out of control. There were dominoes that were falling right and left to eventually knock out Saturday morning cartoons, which is exactly what happened. You add in the onset of all this extra technology, the internet becoming huge. I don't know about you. I know that I believe you have a nephew, and I have a nephew and a couple nieces and stuff. And I noticed with my great niece now, when she's fussy or anything, they hand her the phone and she watches cartoons.
Oh, I hate that.
The ability to just be able to instantly pacify a child with technology like that is part of why Saturday morning cartoons died. There's just nothing special about it anymore, sadly. And that's why. Geez, this has been great. Remington, thank you so much for all the information and for being on, man.
No
is there
problem.
anything you got coming out or down the pike that you want to talk about that people can look forward to?
I have a new book in November coming out called Homie and the Redneck. It's about redneck and a former gangster coming together to save their radio station. Should be out on Amazon by Thanksgiving.
That actually sounds really fun, dude. That sounds like a lot of fun. Please keep me updated on that, and we'll post on our social medias when that becomes available so people can click on it and purchase it, okay?
All right, thank you.
All right, and thank you. And thank you to the listeners. You can find us on all kinds of podcast platforms. We're on Spreaker, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google, Amazon, you name it, we're on there. YouTube. If you can't find us, reach out to us. We'll get on that platform for you that you can't find us on. Otherwise, thank you again for being here, and thank you for tuning in. And if we don't see you out and about anytime soon, perhaps we'll see you at the comic shop.
This has been The Real Short Box. We'll see you at the comic shop. Thanks for listening.